Hi everybody, my name is Bernardo Salcedo. I chose Matthew 16, 1-4 for the textual criticism essay assignment. The USB grade this text C, meaning the committee had difficulty in deciding which variant to place in the test. Most English versions had the longer version with a footnote about the missing part in some manuscripts, except for the KJV. I will approach the analysis of external evidence considering the methodology recommended by Porter and Pitts that says not all evidence bears the same weight. The longer text has 6 majuscules, 17 minuscules, 7 Byzantines, 12 Old Latin lectionaries, 6 versions, and 7 church fathers. One important patristic is Eusebian canons, known as the father of church history, who lived in Palestine in the 4th century. Eusebian invented a system of locating parallel passages in the Gospel by which similar material in the Gospels could be consulted and studied. His system appears to be of great help because it is found in numerous Greek manuscripts of the Gospel and even in the versions like Latin, Syriac, Coptic, and others. I will mention later Eusebius. Codes Ephraim, Besai, and Washingtonianus belongs to the 5th century, one from the 8th and two from the 9th centuries. They represent Alexandrian, Western, Caesarean, and Byzantine text types. The shorter text has 3 majuscules, Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, and Monacensis. The first two, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, from the 4th century and Alexandrian text type. 3 minuscules, including family 13, 3 versions, and 1 church father origin. The weighting evidence is split. For this presentation, I will choose what I consider to be the best witnesses to represent the longer and shorter evidence. For the longer evidence, I chose Codex Besae. Of all of these codices, the best that represent this group is Codex Besae, designated D. This bilingual codex with Greek and Latin facing each other on opposite pages was written with so many remarkable variations. Metzger affirms that the characteristic of this codex is the free addition of words, sentences, and even incidents. On the origins of Codex Besae, most probably this codex was written in Beirut today, to meet the needs of Latin Christians. The city was the main center for Latin in the East and was an education center. The codex was written before the year 400 and corrected by Codex G later. The Western order of the Gospel in its Vorlage could reflect the center's role in teaching Latin. Since Besae is copied from exemplars themselves bilingual and the law school was formed around the year 200, the tradition, according to the Parker, could initiate in the early part of the 3rd century. But how old is the Greek text of Codex Besae? This is a very intriguing question in searching for the original text. Parker made his theory in the following external evidence argument. The context where the text most probably originated was during the second half of the century. The combined authority of the 4 Gospels and comparison between them resulted in the rise of harmonization. Marcionism debate over the issue of one Gospel was significant, and the Diatessaron of Tatian as a result of the comparison was another significant issue, and Codex Besae is another consequence. The text presents some characteristics: the introduction of material about Jesus, the tendency to rewrite the text, and a more colloquial style. But beyond harmonization, the question is, are there other features to trace the original text? In the 2nd century, the text was in a constant process of being reshaped within the context of the church due to the oral tradition. For instance, Papias preferred oral tradition over written tradition. It was then easy during this period to see loose pieces of tradition inserted in the gospel. So the oral tradition the lack of definitively literary status for some of the Gospel in the way to be canonical, and the text of the Gospel of Thomas, showing that the process of the formation and creation of the four Gospels were still active even after the first century, paint a picture of a second century free test. In his conclusion, Parker, responding to the question of the table of how old the test Bezae is, asserts, he said that the kind of test that represent is as old as the beginning of the gospel tradition. My theory and humble opinion is that the Codex Bezae or a similar codex introduced the longer test by even oral tradition, harmonization, or intentional addition very early. For the shorter evidence, the best representative is Codex Sinaiticus. In terms of number of majusculous evidence, the longer text has the double witnesses. In terms of the quality of the text, the shorter has two of the most important manuscripts ever found, Codex Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. Codex Sinaiticus occupies the primary or the primacy among the most important manuscripts. It belongs to the 4th century. The manuscripts once contained the entire Bible, and it was written by a professional and careful scribe. Even though part of the Old Testament perished, Codex Sinaitic is the oldest complete manuscript of the New Testament that exists today. Of course, this makes it unique. But what makes Codex Sinaitic of great importance is the antiquity and quality of its text. Codex Sinaitico is predominantly Alexandrian text type. In his doctoral detailed paper on Matthew 16, 1-4, Charles Quarles threw new consideration for a difficult textual question. In an analysis of the Eusebian apparatus, the system to locate parallel passages, he found out that a dozen of manuscripts with shorter reading typically exhibit confusion in the canon and section numbers. For instance, Codex Sinaiticus contains the Eusebian section and canon number but omits Matthew 16, 2 and 3. But the canon numbers do not match with the parallel in Mark 8, 12. The canon number should be 6 as in Codex E and Y, but was assigned 5. This issue has raised the question if canon number 5 is an indication of an influence by an apparatus based on the inclusion of Matthew 16, 2 and 3. So, Quarles concludes that the agreement of the two earliest extant manuscripts on the shorter reading is mitigated by the realization that a copy of Codex Sinaiticus must have contained the longer reading. The very inconsistent modification to the Eusebian apparatus suggests that there were copies with longer reading, and consequently the shorter reading is a result of the scribe's conscious decision to omit the longer reading. In the internal evidence, one of the considerations using internal evidence is that Matthew 16, 2 and 3 was probably not written by Matthew, but inserted later by a scribe who borrowed from Luke 12, 54 and 56. If the words were original, there is no reason why Codex Sinaiticus and Vaticanus deleted the words on purpose. The dispute among the scholars took place now in the field of interpreting meteorology. Scrivener argues that the words were omitted because in Egypt, red sky in the morning does not mean the advent of rain. Comfort responds to this that this is true in Egypt, but not necessary in Alexandria, where the manuscript was probably written, and the scribe could not object this phenomenon. In conclusion, the weighting evidence is split among the longer and shorter witnesses. Even today, among all the scholars' commentaries, 10 are in favor of the longer test, 10 among the shorter test, and 7 are undecided. The game is tied. I do not think I'm going to lean the scale among those giants, but I lean toward the shorter test for now. God bless.